You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks and Zach Bechtold. We hope you enjoy this week's show, and you can find out more about us by going online at beardedtheologians.com, where you can pick up a few t-shirts, listen to a few old episodes, and find ways that you can connect with us. Thank you for listening. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
So this week on the podcast, we're going to dive into the lectionary reading, which we're actually going to look at John 6. We're going to go 1 through 15. I know it goes through 21, but Zach and I feel like stopping at 15 is a good stopping point. And so, Zach, do what you do with the scripture.
Yeah, certainly. Hear from the Gospel of John, chapter 6. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee. That is the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the miraculous signs he had performed on the sick. Then Jesus went up to the mountainside and sat down with his disciple. The Jewish Passover feast was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 8 months of wages would not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many? Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Then there was plenty of grass in the place, and the men sat down, about 5,000 of them. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were seated, as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the miraculous sign that Jesus did, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world." Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to the mountain by himself. So, Matt, as you hear that reading of feeding the 5,000 out of John's Gospel, what comes to mind?
Same one in all the other Gospels. I mean, in a way.
I don't know. I think it rhymes with the other Gospels, but it's different.
There's definitely some differences, but I don't know. Like, this is definitely a really cool story, and I think it speaks to the gospel of actually like caring for our neighbor and caring for our people, and people that come our way. Because I mean, could you imagine like doing a thing and all of a sudden like 5,000 people showed up and you got to feed them? Like, could you imagine like if on Sunday morning, let's say if you were doing a potluck and like your church folk brought their stuff, but then like 4,000 more people showed up? Like, how do you think your church would respond?
Right. Well, and that's just 5,000 men, right? That's all we're counting at this point. It's certainly you can make an argument that there's more, but you're right. Like, what do you do in that situation? I think that's where it's different than the other tellings in the other Gospels. Is Jesus's approach to it. In the other tellings of it, it's often the disciples coming up and frantically, "Hey Jesus, what are we going to do?" And Jesus asks the question here, "What's it going to take?" And we get Philip and Andrew, right? Like, we don't hear much from Philip and Andrew in the other Gospels. And Jesus asks the question, "What's it going to take?" And Philip's like, "Dude, we don't have enough." It's going to take 8 months worth of wages, right? Um, and I find that really interesting. And Jesus very calmly just says, "Okay, so what do we do here? Have them sit." And then it's Andrew coming in saying, "Hey, we got this young boy. He's got a couple of loaves of bread and a couple of fish. Maybe we can do something with that." And Jesus says, "Certainly." And very familiar, blesses it and begins to pass that out. Um, But I that's what catches my attention is that interaction of, hey guys, what do we do here? How do we handle this? From Jesus rather than the disciples frantically being like, holy crap, we got to feed 5,000 people. What do we do?
Do you ever feel like that when they see the kid with with the five loaves and two fish, like, is that kid over there? Get him.
Get them.
like
Yeah.
like I don't know. Like it seems like every time I read it, I feel like that I don't know, like how did they get the kid to do that? Like, I mean, I would love to have that conversation. Like, how did they convince the kid? Like, hey, like you have some things here that we could use. Like, did they compensate him fairly, or did they just like hold him up by
Mhm.
his shoes and take his, take his five loaves and two fish? Like
Sure.
that would be an interesting thing to see. Obviously, we don't have that story, but like, I don't know. I always find that interesting. And I think when it comes to these stories in any of the gospels, what comes to mind for me is the how would our church respond in this issue? Like how
Mm.
would we respond if we have an overabundance of
Mhm.
food or overabundance of people? And I always remember a story that one of my friends told when they were on a youth trip. They were coming back and stopped at this very small church in a secluded area. And they were one of those small churches, and there are small churches that have like a weekly potluck. Like, there's maybe like 10
Mhm.
members. They have a potluck. It's a good deal. I've guest preached in a few churches like that. It's just a really kind of cool way of community. Um, but they had the person continues the story that they rolled up on this thing and they invited them to stay for the potluck, and they were literally pulling food out of the pantry and like anywhere else they could find food to feed these kids. Because like, could you imagine, like, let's just say if it were 5,000 teenagers that descended upon your congregation on Sunday morning. I mean,
A
you're
lot of
making a
food.
quick call to Domino's and saying, I need all the pizzas now.
Hmm.
And I don't know, like, I think our response to those situations, the way that I'm reading the text, I'm reading it as though they were calm and like, all right, so what's our assets?
Hmm.
What do we have? What can we share? And let's use those. And then like they organize, like this is the one story, and I'm pretty sure you brought this up. There's like the one story where like they literally say how they organize them. Like everybody sit in groups of
Hmm.
10, sit down in groups. That, and I think that that's kind of a really cool thing of like you see more to the story, but then you also like they gather up leftovers so nothing was wasted. Like, what do we do with what do we do when we have meals at the church? Like, and every community I've been in has been different, or we work towards either giving to the poor or shut-ins or whatever. And so, I think this is a good thing for churches to look at, to ask ourselves, what would we do if this were us, and how can we um be calm and collective when if we ever have these experiences. That's just what I would, if I were preaching this text this week, that's probably what I would lean into a little bit.
Sure. Well, it speaks to the flexibility of ministry, right? No matter what we do and what we plan for, it's going to be different. We're going to have a curveball. We're going to have something that pops up. And how do you keep a level head and a gracious head to be like, hey, we didn't expect this, but how do we move forward? What I find really interesting also between this reading and the other gospels, Jesus is preaching and teaching, and the crowd gathers. Right, they follow him across the lake, and because of the wisdom he's sharing. In John's gospel, it's because of the miracles. They see what Jesus is doing, and I love that about John is they don't hide. John doesn't hide that. People are following Jesus for all of the things, and he happened to have just done some really cool things that people noticed, and they're following him to see what he's going to do next a little bit, and owns that, right? And Jesus is very much okay. Have them sit in community and sit in groups, and we'll tend to this. I I find that really. I, I think that's an interesting difference as far as the storytelling in John's gospel, and how John presents Jesus throughout the entire gospel, and what makes it slightly different than, not slightly different, but different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And we see a different side of Jesus. Like I said, he approaches it by asking the question, And I think you're right. I think it's a commentary for us to take a look at the church and how we do things. And are we asking the questions or are we reacting? And I think that's telling here for Jesus. He's not reacting. The disciples aren't even reacting in that panicky way of what do we do? It's just, okay, how do we, here's what's in front of us. How do we approach it well with grace and love? And yeah, how does the boy, you got to assume the young boy with the loaves and the fish also takes a full basket home. I always wonder if he's a passerby. He's just going home to feed his family and happens to pass by. I
I
think
always
there's a story there.
I always, like I said, I always hear, I don't know, I hear like in Ghostbusters when he goes like, get him, like when they're getting Slimer at the very
Yeah,
beginning, like that's what I hear. Like, oh,
yeah,
see that kid over there, he's got some stuff that we could use. Get him. And then you have these disciples like descending upon this kid. Like,
mm,
I mean, I would hope that that's not the story, but like, I don't know. That's just the way that my mind works on that.
yeah, yeah.
And
I
so
think the significant thing that you kind of teased on was, gathering the leftover pieces that nothing should be wasted. Um, I I think there's a lot of I think you could unpack that a whole lot, not just even in how we do potlucks and feed people in the church, but how we approach just anything we do. Where are the leftover pieces and how are we using those to continue to benefit our communities and people in need, whether that be food or um, giving in any kind of way. How are we being good stewards of what we have and not letting things go to waste? And you could ask that of anything we offer in the church. What are the leftovers and how are we using every bit of it so as it doesn't go to waste? I think there's quite a bit of teasing you could do in just any area of the church in that question.
yeah, and I definitely think it's a kind of a good place for us to land today. You're on renewal leave, so I'm not going to ask you the question. Uh, but how are you enjoying renewal leave? I guess will be the question I'll ask you.
Yeah, it's been good. There's been great parts of renewal, and then there's been great parts of not renewal, and just what is it like to take some time off and be away and shut down for a little bit. Very grateful for that, and now that there's 6 days left of it, I think I've got the hang of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's been really, really good, and trying not to be antsy about getting back, but excited to get back, which is good. That's what we were looking for.
Can tell you've been outside a little bit. You're a little red, so
Um,
or
yeah,
it might be the lighting.
I
Yeah.
am. It's a little bit of both. But yeah, no, we've spent a lot of time out on the water and outside, and it's been good. How about you? I'll ask you the question since you're not on renewal leave. Where have you seen God at work the last few weeks?
So let's see what is today, Thursday. So Saturday we have the big rodeo parade, and we hand out water bottles at the parade. So, and they have a little sticker on them that point people to our church and that sort of thing. So last year's idea took like 2 hours to get done because we came up with this way of doing it that just was not very practical. And so this year we bought stickers and we put stickers on them and we were done in like 30 minutes. And it was really fun to like people like I had people show up for the second service and like where the water bottles are there like what do I need to do? And like we did 500 water bottles in less than 45 minutes, which was amazing because last year we didn't even scratch the surface of that. And so it's really fun to have those conversations. And then tonight we have a choir from Uganda being here to sing to sing for the community, and so we're hoping we could draw a big crowd for that. So it's kind of exciting for that sort of stuff. So just things that kind of it's great to see the spirit at work in those spaces. So yeah. I want to encourage our listeners to go to our website at beardedtheologians.com, where you can find all of our past content and other items, as well as picking up a couple t-shirts or stickers or whatever else you need to fill your Bearded Theologians need. They make great gifts for your new pastor or retiring pastor, whatever you may have as we enter into a new season. And so we want to thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and share us, and also don't forget to comment on all the things. So for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
I want you to subscribe and like this video and push that thumbs up.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.